So when I don't know what to write, I fall back into just sticking with dialogue and writing dialogue. And I've heard this is weird, so I'm going to be talking about my perception of dialogue and how I think you should be writing dialogue, how you should be looking at dialogue as a writer. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. Dialogue is weird. And I think most people understand that it is weird. I think most people understand that dialogue is different than other writing. And you can actually even see it when you're looking at a page. There's a different way dialogue is written on a page and how it clumps together than other writing. And there's a very good reason for that that I'm going to be getting into. But it is a weird type of writing. It is something that I've heard. Maybe people actually don't have issues with it. But I've heard people have issues with dialogue. But I just want to tell you that dialogue follows a similar pattern to writing. Actually, I would say that it still falls into the same pattern as writing. Now, just because it falls into that same pattern doesn't mean it's not difficult to deal with, but we're going to get into that today. So why? Why is dialogue hard for some people? When you write outside of dialogue, you're writing from one perspective. Your thoughts are all going to tie together. They're going to flow. If you're writing an essay, what you're going to be doing, or what at least I do when I write an essay or when I write from one perspective, is that I go and I see that the whole entire paragraph works. And then I see if all the paragraphs fit together one by one. I see, oh, does that paragraph fit to the next one? Does that paragraph fit with the next one, etc. And I look at how the flow is going, and I get into a rhythm when I'm doing this, because each paragraph does logically connect to the other paragraph. But when you write dialogue, you might notice that you get to the end of a paragraph that flows really well, and then you run into dialogue and it just doesn't fit with what came before it. It's jarring. It seems to be completely out of nowhere. It's something that just doesn't seem to fit with everything around it. It breaks that writing rhythm you created by going from paragraph to paragraph to paragraph and seeing if all those paragraphs flowed together and moving on to the next one, etc. When you write normally, you are writing from a single perspective. But when you write dialogue, and this might be all you need to know to understand how dialogue works, when you write dialogue, you are at least writing from two different perspectives. So, if you take my advice on writing in general, you know that I say you should get into the mindset of the character. You should try to see things as that character sees things. If you are writing dialogue and there are two different minds working within your story, then you are going to have to understand the perspective of each of those characters when you're writing dialogue. Because each person in reality has a specific thought process. Everybody has their own idiosyncrasies. Everybody has their own experiences. Everybody has thought through something and came to conclusions that are absolutely correct. And your characters are not going to be any different. Each character has a specific thought process and has a specific thought pattern. So, we need to understand the thought process of each. And then, when we're writing dialogue, we need to understand that these two thought processes interact with each other, okay? What might really help you with dialogue is to write how a character thinks outside of dialogue. So you start the dialogue with one character, and you run through that character talking to himself. And then you do that with the other character. And then you see what happens when you combine that dialogue and you make adjustments as needed. Of course, you're not going to keep the exact same thing, because when two people talk, things go in different directions. Sometimes people agree, sometimes people don't agree. Sometimes a person has a parrot on their mind, sometimes someone is hungry. Say two characters are talking about the weather, just to make it really simple. And say one of those characters is afraid and the other one is angry. that is going to change how the dialogue is. One might be afraid of a storm coming. One might be angry with a storm coming. One might be afraid of the storm coming. One might be angry with the other character. There's a lot of variations you can do with this. What if one character is bored? What if one is extremely interested? There's people who like weather. That's just part of their personality. It's just part of how they work. While the rest of us think that most weather events are the most boring thing in the world. Or what if you had somebody who was a simpleton and the other person who was a genius? Or if they were in a disagreement, or if you had somebody who was a yes man. You can essentially fill in whatever type of people you want. You can make somebody a crook. You can make somebody a Boy Scout. You can go on and on and on with this. And the more you know about your characters, and the more you're able to get into their heads, the more nuanced you're going to be able to make that specific character's dialogue, because you know how that character is going to respond to certain things. And then if you can get into the head of the other character, you can make the characters play off of one another. And one of my favorite things is to have a goal in the distance. And I want the characters to end up at this specific point in their dialogue, or I want their dialogue to lead them to this specific point for another reason. For example, if I use the idea of Chekhov's gun, which is a gun on the mantle, I could have two characters who start an amiable agreement, and then they run into something they disagree about, and they find that it's something very close to both of their hearts, and they get more and more heated, and they start to throw things at each other, and eventually one of the characters makes it over to the weapon on the wall and uses it. So that is an example of two characters playing off one another to build tension, to move them toward a specific object or goal, and to make something happen in your story. It can be extremely effective. And if you actually get into the minds of the characters so that you can make the characters go back and forth, it can greatly increase the enjoyment of your writing. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.